Hurricane Floyd remains an extremely dangerous hurricane at this hour with winds very near Category 5 status. And folks along the Florida coast are battening down the hatches and preparing for the worst. Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Weather Center, sponsored by Safelite Auto Glass. I'm Bob Child, and I'll be taking a look at the weather across the country. But first, we're going to go right over to Jeanetta Jones in the Forecast Center with the very latest on Hurricane Floyd. Jeanetta?
Thanks a lot, Bob. We are watching very closely what is going on with this hurricane, a very strong hurricane and potentially a very deadly hurricane as it's moving due west towards the southeastern coastline and towards the Bahamas at this point. Want to show you another satellite vantage point of this hurricane. It is very well defined, about as well defined as you're ever going to see as far as a hurricane is concerned. And as you can see, it's moving due west towards the Bahamas right now and towards Florida at this point. Want to show you the latest information on this hurricane. 24.2 north, 73.0 west. We expect another advisory with new points there for you by 5 o'clock, so you'll want to tune in for that as well. That centers at about 470 miles southeast of Palm Beach, Florida. The winds at 155 miles per hour. Moving west at 15 miles per hour. Now, as we've been saying, at 155 miles per hour with the winds, that categorizes it as a very strong Category 4 hurricane. If you're not familiar with the Saffir-Simpson scale, it's something like this. It goes from 1 to 5. So the strongest hurricane you can get would be a Category 5, and catastrophic damage would occur with a Category 5 hurricane if it makes landfall. We are talking about 155 mile per hour winds right now. Anything greater than that would be a Category 5. So you are at the strongest point of a Category 4 hurricane right now. Extreme damage possible with this hurricane. We have hurricane watches in effect for parts of the southeastern coast from just south of Brunswick, Georgia, down towards Florida City, Florida, and that does include Lake Okeechobee. We also have hurricane warnings in effect for the northwest Bahamas and the central Bahamas. Schools in the islands of the Bahamas have been closed today. Emergency shelters for residents and visitors are now open. All non-essential government offices have been closed, and most airlines have ceased flights in and out of international airports, including Nassau International Airport and Freeport International Airport. All cruise lines have rerouted their ships away from Floyd and the Bahamas, and we also have tropical storm warnings still in effect for the southeastern Bahamas, the Turks, and the Caicos. So obviously extensive watches and warnings are in effect. Folks in Miami are not taking any chances when it comes to Hurricane Floyd. The supermarkets are crowded with shoppers trying to stock up on supplies. Items like water, milk, and bread are being snapped up as residents brace for Floyd's impact. We are also told that in Brevard County, for the low-lying areas, and a mandatory evacuation has now gone into effect for the low-lying areas in Brevard County. We will continue to monitor the situation as far as evacuations go and give you the latest information as it becomes available. Right now, let's go to the expert desk with Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane expert, for more analysis on this. Steve?
Thanks, Jeanetta, and we continue to monitor a westward moving tropical cyclone. We're still hoping and still anticipating, based on our current observations and the model guidance, that it's going to take a northwest turn later this afternoon into this evening. Let's look at the latest infrared satellite imagery here. Here's the Florida coast. Here are the Bahamas here, and this is San Salvador Island here, where there's a hurricane warning up. A ship observation just came in a little while ago over here, about 2 hours ago. Winds were 60, 65 miles per hour. Seas were 22 feet, and that was in the western portion of the circulation. The highest seas are up in here, pushing off toward the west-northwest, up toward the northeastern United States and up toward the Carolinas, and also off toward Florida. So we have a very powerful hurricane here, and we're looking at an area that is anticipated to turn into a more northward turn along the coast, but so far we have not seen that. Now, size-wise, this tropical cyclone is rather large. It's roughly on the size of Hurricane Gilbert. Maybe a little bit larger than Camille, but not any smaller than Camille. And relative to Hurricane Andrew, it's much, much larger in its overall aerial extent. And what that means, of course, is we have an, even if you're missed directly by the eye of the circulation, you still have a very good chance of having some very strong winds, some very large waves, some surge action along the coast if you live there, and some rain activity as well. Here's the eye as it approaches San Salvador Island. You can see it right there. Cat Island up to the northwest of that. Miami off to the east. And keep in mind, this looks very close, but we're still about 500 miles away from the eye circulation to Miami. So we still have a long way to go, and it's quite possible that portions of this part of the hurricane actually move over the Florida coast as it turns to the north. So the strongest winds are surrounded very close to where the eye is, within about 30 miles of the eye. Now over the Bahama Islands, we can expect very high wind damage potential, high wave damage potential, and high surge on the order of 15 to 20 feet. Now keep in mind, a lot of those islands don't have much land mass above that, the smaller islands. The rain problem doesn't appear to be too big because the circulation is moving at a reasonable pace. Now here's the trough. We expect to pick it up, and we're still anticipating that northward turn, monitoring very carefully, and we'll tell you as soon as we see it, the turn, whether it takes place or not. Now let's get back to Jeanetta.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Steve Lyons, for your expert analysis. We'll be checking back with him in just a little while as we continue to monitor this massive hurricane. Florida Governor Jeb Bush has declared a state of emergency in Florida, which frees up state resources and actually activates the National Guard. Earlier today, Governor Bush held a news conference with emergency operations personnel to brief residents on the possible impact of Floyd.
Floridians in coastal communities should be prepared to evacuate if told to do so by local officials, and they need to plan now on where they will go should they have to evacuate. I encourage neighbors to help those in their communities who are elderly or who may need help in preparing for this storm.
Bush says the Emergency Operations Center will operate 24 hours a day until the threat of Floyd diminishes. Meanwhile, South Carolina's governor has ordered National Guard troops to move towards the coast. Governor Jim Hodges says he'll meet with officials this evening, assess the situation, and have an update later tonight. Well, now we are going to be turning back over to the studio and Bob Child with a look at the rest of the country.
Coming up, get the forecast for the next 7 days in your weekly planner.
All eyes along the eastern seaboard should be on Hurricane Floyd. The strong Category 4 hurricane is marching toward the U.S. We have live reports.
And even though Floyd may not make a direct hit on Florida, you wouldn't know it by the way people are acting here. I'm Jim Cantori in Melbourne, and I'll give you a live report in just a moment.
And I'm Bill Keneally here in Lake Worth, Florida. Mandatory evacuation orders are now up on the barrier islands here in Palm Beach County. The winds are increasing as well. A full report just ahead on Weather Center.
I'm Nick Walker. I'll have the latest weather conditions across the nation. But first, let's find out what's happening with Hurricane Floyd. For that, we go to the Forecast Center with Christina Abernathy.
All right, thanks, Nick. Of course, we continue to watch the strong Category 4 hurricane. Let's take a look at the latest details on Hurricane Floyd. And as of the latest in the U.S., the Category 4 hurricane continues its march toward the Bahamas with its sights set on Florida. Florida's governor declared a state of emergency earlier today, clearing the way for evacuations and National Guard deployment. A hurricane warning is in effect for all of the mainland Florida East Coast from Florida City to just south of Brunswick, Georgia. Already tens of thousands along the Florida coast have been given evacuation orders, mostly residents of mobile homes and in low-lying areas. Along the Georgia coast, a hurricane watch is in effect from Brunswick to Savannah. And up and down the East Coast tonight, residents and officials alike are comparing Floyd to Hurricane Andrew, which slammed into the Florida coast in 1992. Well, we have some new information on Hurricane Floyd. Let's get right to that. The latest coordinates have Floyd centered right now at 24.4 and 74.1 west. That puts the center about 35 miles northeast of San Salvador, or about 100 miles southeast of Palm Beach, Florida. The winds 155 miles per hour, moving to the west at 14 miles per hour, and the pressure is now 924 millibars. Here are the hurricane watches and warnings. The warnings are in effect for the northwest and central Bahamas, and also from Florida City, Florida to Brunswick, Georgia, north of there to Savannah. Hurricane watch